This week, Nathan Hunstad, Principal Security Engineer and Researcher at Code 42, joins us for an interview discussing SIEM and SOAR. In the enterprise security news, secure and monitor AWS Lambda with new but not related features from Datadog and Imperva. ServiceNow integrates with Microsoft Solutions. SentinelOne wins 2 awards. Reducing risk with IAM. Kemp launches Zero Trust. AWS launches another container product. Zscaler acquires Smokescreen, the company, not an actual smokescreen, unfortunately. Maybe both. Sumo Logic acquires DF Labs, Uptick, Salt Security, and SpecTrust, secure funding, and more. We close out the show with 2 pre-recorded interviews from RSAC 2021 featuring Drew Rose from Living Security and Ganesh Pai from Upticks. Stay tuned for all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Stopping advanced threats requires knowing exactly what you're up against. ExtraHop Reveal X is the only solution that shows you not just where intruders are going, but where they've been. 90-day look back and complete network visibility across the data center, cloud, and device edge help security teams respond 84% faster with ExtraHop Reveal X network detection and response. Explore the interactive demo at securityweekly.com/ExtraHop. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode number 229 for May 26th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hi there. Looking forward to today. Great title there, and just got my show notes updated.
Sweet. Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us. Tyler, welcome.
Hey guys. Yeah, great to see y'all again.
Outstanding. If you'd like to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, make sure you visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher or to our YouTube channel. Sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, and follow us on our newest live streaming platform. That's right, we are on Twitch. And I guess the show's over because my teleprompter is blank. So if there was another, there is another announcement. If you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the shows, submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests. Complete that form. We'll cover those topics and we'll cover those guests. That's right, we have blankets. So please do that. We love your feedback. Nathan Hunstad is a principal security researcher at Code 42. You can learn more about Code 42, as this segment is sponsored by Code 42, by visiting securityweekly.com/Code 42 for Code 42's Insider for Insider Risk Management. In this segment, though, Nathan's going to talk about SIEM and SOAR along with the rest of us. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Happy to be here.
Yes, very nice to have you. The topic is very timely. As I was saying before we got started, that there's some acquisitions, and I think we've seen a history of acquisitions and or new features being added by the SIEM vendors because SOAR is so important. So I guess, Nathan, I'll turn to you to kind of set the stage and exactly what we mean by those terms and how they relate.
Yeah, absolutely. So SIEM is a very fundamental part of a lot of security programs. SIEM stands for Security Incident and Event Monitoring or Management. And it's really the centralized tool that a lot of security operations teams, SOC teams use to manage the various events and alerts they're getting from all their security tools, categorize them, prioritize them, do some event correlation to try to bubble up the worst or the most critical events and alerts to the SOC team, and use that as jumping off point for investigations. So like I've said, that's a very, very frequent and very common tool in the security space. And it's had a lot of problems. It's complicated. Correlation rules are hard to set up. And so a lot of teams are now looking more towards SOAR, which is security orchestration, automation, and response, which is relatively new to the industry. It's been around for a few years. And it's something that security teams use to automate and speed up a lot of their investigations and try to reduce that dwell time, reduce that time to contain by automating a lot of your typical response actions, whether that be isolating hosts on a network, whether that be putting firewall rules in place to block malicious traffic, and so forth. I've worked with both. I've worked with many different SIEM tools in the past. I have worked with a couple SOAR tools as well, and I do think that the approach taken by SOAR is the way of the future, and that, as you mentioned, SIEM tools are looking more and more towards automation and buying or building that kind of response. So it is, I think, one of the bigger trends in security operations today.
Nathan, what do you look for in a really good SIEM platform and the SOAR functionality? What's some of your evaluation criteria?
Yeah, I think ease of use and low maintenance is really important when it comes to both. I think it's especially important when it comes to SIEM because those, like I said, tend to be a lot more complicated. With most, enterprise tools, you're not going to have to worry a lot about whether they integrate with, common log formats and some of the major vendors because most of those do that. I would say that one benefit you do get if you go with a SIEM tool that is from one of the major security vendors that you may already have other tools with, you can get maybe a little bit better integration, but that's certainly not a requirement. When it comes to SOAR tools, it's all about the integrations. It's all about what tools can your SOAR plug into in order to drive remediation. And that is specifically taking actions on your firewalls, on your email filters, on your web filters, and so forth. So you want to make
Nathan,
sure.
I want to stop right there because I think what you've said is very fascinating in the difference in the evaluation criteria. Because with SIEM, it's more about usability and maintainability. With SOAR, it's more about features, right? And I think that's an important distinction because I think in the past we've been like, my SIEM needs to have this feature, that feature. It's less about a feature battle on the SIEM side, more about usability. And on the SOAR side, it is about features because it has to integrate with your security stack.
Yeah, absolutely. And SIEM is obviously a lot more mature tool. It's been around for a lot longer. And SOARs are still early enough in that they do take different approaches to how they do actions or playbook management and so forth. So I do think that there is a lot more innovation going on in the SOAR space right now. And that is why, feature differentiation is one of the prime things to look for when you are evaluating a SOAR tool.
Adrian, I know you have thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges here. The integrations are a challenge. I've managed a lot of SIEMs in my days, and it was always a challenge there when you had to write a parser when they were missing a parser. And I imagine a lot of people run into the same issue with the SOAR integrations. And I think as Security Weekly Labs does product reviews, one of the things we're really focusing on, is how you can be successful with them. Who do you need on staff? And certainly with SIEM and SOAR, like as great as the integrations are, you're still likely to have to write some code at some point or to build a parser at some point, or, JSON CSV needs to become JSON. JSON needs to become something else, and you got to have people that can do that. So, I'm curious if you agree there. If one of the big challenges you see is the labor that you have to put into these tools.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you definitely have to put in labor with both. On the SIEM side, I would say it's more, tuning, configuration, making sure everything is working correctly, which is a little bit less interesting, I'd say, than on the SOAR side, where you're right, you are writing code and you are writing integrations. That is a lot more flexible, and that, frankly, I think that's a lot more fun. And that's where you also have to look at how supportable the other security tools are in your environment when you think about bringing on a SOAR tool. Things like API documentation are incredibly important because, like you mentioned, there may not be an integration already written for one of the tools that you use in your environment.
I want to jump in and comment on something you said, and I think it's more than just fun. So at RSA, there was a keynote by Wade Baker and Wendy Nather who were going through the security practices that result in desirable outcomes. And one of those that was way high on the list, it was in the top 5. I forget exactly where it was. But well-integrated security systems was paired with, better employee retention, and better morale in the security team. So I think it's more than just fun. It's very rewarding to be able to automate some of these tasks that really suck to do manually. Where literally that old saying of replace you with a small shell script, that's what you're doing, and it's not a bad thing because the thing you're replacing with a shell script really sucks to do by hand.
I 100% agree. And, that's one thing that I think that I've tried to do in my career, and that is look to automate and get rid of all of the little things that really aren't adding a lot of security value because, we all know that there's a shortage of analysts, there's a sort of security expertise in general, and it is a waste of an analyst's time to try to track down, a DHCP log entry that matches an IP to a host name and all the silly little things that are crucial to an investigation, but are 100% automatable. And when you get rid of that mental burden on the analyst's side, you get a lot more time to really dig in deep and do those investigations and do things like threat hunting that really add a lot of value to the security organization's overall maturity.
Yeah, I like to think of it as you're not automating the analysis piece, right? You're automating the workflow that aids in your analysis. Analysis may not be the right term there, but when I bring up automation, whether it's in the context of security or any kind of operational activity, I've been phrasing it as automating the workflow. And exactly what you're saying, like bringing those pieces in automatically, putting them in an assembly line, sending feedback back to people that need it. That's automating the workflow so that you're set up better to do your job as an analyst or an engineer to build something or go discover something, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the way that you phrase that. Absolutely.
So what are some of the use cases that you see? What are some of the more exciting, because that's one of the things I've run into with these. I actually worked on the vendor side and, worked with the Phantoms and Demistos on our integrations with those tools. And one of the things that constantly comes in is, like I've noticed there's a couple of very obvious use cases, that are there out of the box that people might use. And then after that, they're kind of scratching their heads.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. The obvious use cases are the ones that are still valuable, like phishing response and so forth. I think overall, when you have a SOAR tool, it really allows you to just open up and start brainstorming new events or new alerts to set up that you may not have wanted to do in the past simply because it's overwhelming. And those are things like every time a domain admin logs in to your environment, I think that should be an alert that generates an investigation. Even if that happens a high number of times a day, for example, that's still a super important event in your environment. And using SOAR, you may be able to automate that investigation quite thoroughly, where you can handle the increased volume of alerts. So that's why I think it really opens up the security team's brainstorming to be able to think through or come up with things that may normally be too noisy, but with SOAR you can handle at scale.
So quick question. The SIEM, I've heard a lot of complaints about SIEMs being overwhelming with alert fatigue, and you kind of touched on it a little bit in that answer, but I want to double click. Is one of the appropriate ways to solve the alert fatigue problem the automation side of the house? Is that a natural 1-2 punch to get past the overwhelming nature of traditional SIEM models?
Yes, absolutely. I do think that they do pair very well together, and that's why so many SIEM vendors are purchasing SOAR tools and SOAR capabilities these days. When you do have alert fatigue, and it's definitely a real thing, being able to handle those alerts at scale and investigate more is really important. I think the trap that a lot of people fall into with SIEMs when they have alert fatigue is that rather than try to find better ways of investigating all those events, they just turn them off. And that's where you start missing things.
Yeah, that's where the pain occurs. And then have you thought about integrations into either traditional CMDBs or the more modern cyber asset management systems? Because I think, one of the deltas between the new versions of asset management and traditional SIEM is event driven, where cyber asset management is kind of more asset detection and continuous update of state of assets. I think that's a natural 1-2 punch that would marry well with SIEM and SOAR as well.
Yeah, agreed. I do think that at a very simple level, a lot of investigations have to start with the basics. What is this endpoint that's in my environment? Does it belong here? And being able to tie in that automation with like a CMDB tool is a very effective way to, again, handle those kinds of things at scale.
Yeah, that's a great 1-2 punch is pulling those things together. We're seeing that from our side as well.
I think that's really interesting. It almost makes me want to update my magic, not quadrants, enchanted quadrants is what I call them to avoid any controversy, right? Where you collect data from endpoints, from other log sources, threat intelligence, and the network. What I think is kind of interesting, Tyler, Nathan, based on what you both said, was I could almost draw a circle in the middle of those 4 quadrants and go asset management is critical, interface to that, right? Because in all of those sources, like they're going to feed, it's going to be a two-way relationship, right? You're going to feed into asset management, but also I need to know what my assets are when I'm doing an investigation that's maybe correlating from some or all of those other areas.
Yeah, what we're seeing actually from the Jupiter One perspective on that side of the fence is what our head of research, Sunil Yu, calls left of boom and right of boom, right? Yep. And so you've kind of got your cyber asset management systems like Jupiter One and Exonius that are left of boom, constantly taking inventory, knowing what's what at any given moment in time, all the way down to the asset-specific meta detail. And then right of boom, when the event occurs, the marriage of the SIEM plus the asset management system gives the SOC analyst just a phenomenal way of triaging quickly that they wouldn't have been able to do otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think that the problem is even bigger these days because so much of our infrastructure is SaaS. It's in Azure, it's in AWS, and so forth. And your traditional asset management tools can't keep up with that. They're not well integrated with that. Whereas a SOAR tool may allow you to query in real time against AWS and find out, who owns that EC2 instance, what's the information about it, what's the tags, what's the metadata, and provide that very valuable information for an investigation.
Yeah, and you can't get to the point where you're truly automating with SOAR unless you know what you have and can tie that into it as well. Because you do have an automated workflow, but I think I always take pages out of DevOps, right? When that automated workflow happens, I want someone to be aware that that's happened or is happening, right? And in order to notify the right person, you have to know what you have and who owns it and maybe who manages it and the responsible parties. And I think that's what newer asset management gives you in the context of this conversation. And it's super important. Because I mean, before we, I would do this at university. I'm like, wow, yeah, I looked at my logs manually and that system's definitely compromised. I'm like, I wonder who owns that system. I'm like, I wonder what building that, like, let's start with what building that's in, because I had a 144 acre campus, right? And then based on what building it's in, maybe I can know what department it is, and maybe that can tell me who I need to call, right? And that, I mean, that was actually one of the biggest roadblocks to doing incident response.
Yeah, absolutely. And that actually brings up another point, which is that, once you figured that out, that you can repeat it, you have that capability, but how do you transfer that to other people? Whereas if you can put that into a SOAR playbook, now that is instantly usable by everyone on the team, even somebody who was, on the SOC, on the job their first day. So that's another way that you can leverage a SOAR to really capture that institutional knowledge and make sure that people are doing the right things and being consistent.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point, because before there was a lot of the sophistication in automation, I'd just be like, well, I don't know who owns it. I'm like, just turn off the port and then see who calls the help desk. But then you'd have to notify the help desk that you were doing that you were turning off that port, so that when someone called, they'd put the pieces together, and that didn't always line up. And that just creates friction across the board.
We call that asset inventory by outage.
Yes. Not a good way to it usually is, someone's manager or, executive calling you very angry, calling your manager, right? It's not the way to do it. Yeah, definitely knowing who owns stuff is still hard today, because like you said, Nathan, these assets now exist in the cloud, and they're not even assets as we typically think of them, right? They're some service running somewhere, and we got to know who's responsible for that.
Exactly. I mean, they may be ephemeral. They may be a Docker container that exists for an hour to do a job, and that is gone forever. And that is a hard situation to live in, but that's the reality of most security teams these days.
Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the best integrations with SOAR? You mentioned firewalls and other kind of blocking technology. Are there other integrations that you're really fond of with your SOAR platform?
Yeah, I think that SOAR matches well with EDR tools, because a lot of the alerts and investigations you may be involved in do involve an endpoint that a user owns, and being able to take steps or take actions against that endpoint, be it collecting processes, ending processes, putting firewall rules in place so that you can essentially pause and call a timeout while you do a further investigation. That's a really important one. Another one is, I think, whatever tool you're using for a mail gateway or mail scanning. If you do especially notice something like a targeted phish against your users, being able to quickly block that, quarantine it, do something with it so it doesn't get to your end users, or even better, pull it out of the mailboxes of those users who have already received it. Those are things that 100% will improve the security of your organization.
Yeah, I like that too, especially as people are working from home more than ever. Although people are starting to go back in the office, but not 100% of the time. So there's no port to turn off. And using your EDR as your kind of virtual port, right? And being more precise with it. Being able to end a single process rather than just disable the entire port, right? We don't always have that luxury.
Absolutely. That's another thing that we all have to deal with as well, and that is the remote workforce. And so being able to at least provide your SOC team with a bigger menu of actions versus just all right, block out of the firewall. Well, they're not behind the firewall.
Yeah, and of course, that would tie into your insider threat system as well. I'm sure you have integrations into Code 42's Insider, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, we do have integrations into our own Insider tool, which we obviously use it, in-house as well to monitor for insider threat. As with both SIEM and SOAR, the more data you can get in there, the more value you get overall. But I think with SOAR, since you have the response there as well, it's that much more useful to have that extra data and extra integrations in place.
Absolutely. Well, Nathan, thank you. Oh, sorry. Closing questions. Sorry, I was premature.
Yeah. Sorry, we had a question on Discord about in your position, it might be tough to play favorites with commercial SOAR vendors, but maybe you could mention what platforms you have integrations with, and I don't know if there are any real open source options out there. Do you?
I'm not aware of any great open source options when it comes to SOAR tools. I do know that Code 42 Insider has integrations with both Splunk Phantom and Palo Alto's Cortex XSOAR. We use XSOAR internally, and so that's an integration that we find very valuable. In terms of open source, there's a tool that I've seen called the Hive that kind of does some of these things, but it's definitely not as robust as a SOAR tool, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
Outstanding. Nathan, thank you for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly today.
Thank you very much. I had a great time.
Outstanding. We did as well. For folks who want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/code42. With that, we'll take a short break and talk about the enterprise security news. Stay tuned.